everyone knows Pokemon Red and Blue, or if you are Japanese, Pokemon Red and Green. But there is an extra added version to the game that you might not be completely aware of. Pokemon Yellow. Now, Pokemon Yellow is very much like the original Pokemon Red and Blue or Red and Green, depending on where you're from. However, there are several key differences that honestly make the game much more accessible to anime fans, because this game is actually more inspired by the anime. Looking at Pokemon Yellow is pretty much the same plot as Pokemon Red and Green or Red and Blue. It starts out with Red and Blue, or, if you're watching the anime, Ash Ketchum and Gary leaving Pallet Town and going through the, regular steps. Professor Oak is wanting you to fill up the Pokedex. You go and fight Brock. Wait, let's go back a second. What about the starters? One of the key differences in this version of the game is that rather than being given Charmander, Bulbasaur, Squirtle, you are given neither starter Pokemon. Instead, you are given Pikachu. And your rival, Gary, Blue, is given an Eevee, which is honestly, I think, a very fascinating choice because of this. In Pokemon Yellow, you are able to catch all three starter Pokemon. There are some aesthetic changes in the game too. For example, the font for all the Pokemon scripts has been changed. The art style is much more similar to the anime, with a lot of the Pokemon sprites now looking much more like the anime. Some of the trainer sprites were redone. For example, Red and Blue now look much more like their stock artwork for Generation 1. Brock looks just more similar to the anime, and Misty, for example, is now wearing shirts and shorts, much like her counterpart in the anime. There's a lot of differences in the location too. For example, in Route 6, a junior trainer is changed to Joe and Giselle, like from the anime. At one point in Route 9, there's a youngster, which is now changed to AJ, like the anime. And occasionally, there are some changes when it comes to who's going after you. For example, you can occasionally fight Jesse and James. The gameplay, of course, is very similar to how it was back in the original Red and Blue. Pikachu is, of course, the only starter Pokemon. And, funnily enough, this is the first game to ever have a Pokemon follow you. This is something that is honestly a feature that I absolutely adore as a fan of Pokemon. It's fun to see the Pokemon following you, like how Pikachu does with Ash. And it's a feature that came back later on in Pokemon Soul Silver and Heart Gold. And then now it's pretty much a key feature in the modern Pokemon games, where your Pokemon, you can ride them, they can follow you. And it all started here in the Game Boy Color title, Pokemon Yellow. Later Pokemon games, starting with Generation 2, introduced a key feature about friendship. And this is the first game where you really see that feature implemented. And it's really only done with Pikachu, but it adds a lot to your relationship with your starter Pokemon, Pikachu. Pikachu can be mad at you, Pikachu can be angry, and then later on, as you start to make him like you more, he'll eventually warm up to you, and he'll be much more cute, and he'll pretty much form a bond with you. And I think it adds a lot to the game's storytelling, and it honestly makes the game a bit more interesting. Pokemon Yellow was made pretty much entirely because of Pokemon the first movie. which was made that year it had come out. So it was pretty much made entirely just to promote the anime, which you can pretty much tell. Pokemon became a worldwide commodity because of the anime, I would argue, almost as much as the game. The game was successful, but there are plenty of fans that go to Pokemon pretty much exclusively because of the anime and the card games. And I feel like Pokemon Yellow is a good way to bring in those fans that know Pokemon as the story of Ash Ketchum and his lovable mouse, electric mouse Pokemon, Pikachu. I would argue that Pokemon Yellow is the definitive edition of Generation 1, and it is most definitely the canonical version of Generation 1. As you can see in future titles, the team that Red has is a team you could only gain in Pokemon Yellow, because Red has a Pikachu, he has a Venusaur, he has Blastoise, and he has a Charizard. A team that he could only really get if it was the Red that we meet in Pokemon Yellow. So if you want to become the Red that we meet in Pokemon Generation 2 and then in the future titles, this is arguably the game that you're going to have to experience and play. Overall, I think Pokemon Yellow is arguably, at least to me, the definitive way to play Generation 1. It is very fun, it has some more interesting mechanics, and you get to catch the most diverse range of Pokemon, including all 3 of the original starters, which I think puts this game up above many of the other versions of Generation 1, including some of the remakes of Generation 1. So, if you want to return to Pokemon, or even just play Pokemon for the first time, I feel like Pokemon Yellow is a very easy and fun way to get into Pokemon, especially now that I believe it's on the Virtual Console for Switch. So, give it a try.